and then share my screen. All right, so welcome to the Metaphor Writing Workshop. And today, what we're really going to accomplish is we want to help you create stronger and more powerful imagery within your songwriting. So metaphor is a way that you can do that very efficiently, because many times within writing in metaphor, you don't have to use many words to say a lot. So we're going to talk about how to use that powerful tool. We're also going to help you continue developing your individual, unique songwriting voice. So really helping you to become the songwriter that you are, because I think the key to songwriting is really to do whatever you do the best that you can do it, and not really try to be someone else, because it's not very fun to try to copy all the time. Although imitating can be a great way to learn. We also want to learn how to blend abstract and concrete concepts. So how do we create imagery based around feelings? How do we create imagery based around just a concept or maybe an emotion? So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about how to find connections between the concrete world and the abstract world. Like what things do they have in common? And then we'll learn how to write about the external landscape, or what's happening around your characters, and then also the internal landscape that's happening inside your characters or your narrator of your song. So, whoops, there we go. So what is metaphor? So we're going to first set the foundation. And I studied with Berklee College of Music, so I've taken some of Pat Patterson's courses, and Pat says that in its most basic form, metaphor is a collision between ideas that don't belong together. So it jams them together and leaves us to struggle with the consequences. And an example that he gives is an army is a rabid wolf. So this is from his book, Writing Better Lyrics, which many of you have. So the basic idea is metaphor is taking two things that usually aren't considered in the same thought process, or they're not the same, and they're putting it together to show a picture. And metaphor is a way to add concrete details to ideas that we can't touch. So it can help pull your listener in and expand the meaning of what you're writing within your songs. And I think all of us have heard, somebody will say, you should add more imagery to your song, or you should you should do more showing and less telling. Showing is usually using imagery. Sometimes it's hard when you're writing about an emotion or a concept, because you have to try to figure out, well, how do I show that? Well, metaphor is a tool that you can use to make that happen. So a metaphor also needs to be false. It needs to create some sort of conflict. So if we just said a car is a vehicle, or maybe the wrench is cold steel, that's not a metaphor, because it's a definition or a declaration. So it doesn't create that conflict within the items. So in order for a metaphor to work, there must be that mismatch. So an example here would be the wrench is a snake. So then that becomes a metaphor at that time. So that's an interesting kind of concept to remember as you're writing, is sometimes you may think you're writing in metaphor, but you're actually just doing a declaration, or, just stating something, which isn't always bad if it works. So there's types of metaphor. So we do have a few different options that you can think about as you are writing. So the types of metaphor are expressed identity, that's when you collide a noun to a noun, where you say something is something else. So that's expressed identity. A qualifying metaphor is an adjective with a noun, or an adverb with a verb. So an example of, a qualifying metaphor is maybe the dancing car, or, think of an adjective that doesn't go with a noun, and put those together. So sometimes you may think of it as like personification, but that wouldn't be a qualifying metaphor. And then the other type of metaphor is a verbal metaphor, which is caused from the collision of verbs and nouns. So I'll show you some examples of all of these as well. So let's start with expressed identity. So there's really three really strong ways to think of metaphor writing from the expressed identity standpoint. And this looks like algebra, but believe me, this isn't math. But the three things are the X is Y. There's also the Y of X, and the X is Y. So what that means is, as you have two nouns through the expressed identity, you would have, like, the X here is fire and the Y is dog. So fire is a dog. So that's your first X is Y. The next is the Y of X, which is the dog of fire. And then the last one is the fire's dog. So that's a great way to remember how to create different versions of this expressed identity. Any questions or thoughts on that so far? Perfect. So the next one is the qualifying metaphor. So again, this is where you have the collision of adjectives with nouns or the collision of adverbs with verbs. So examples would be an adjective with a noun would be impatient sunset, or screaming car would be, verbs and nouns, or it could be an adjective there, or to honestly run. That would be an adverb with a verb. So those are your qualifying metaphors, which I think a lot of people use a little bit more than they realize, because we're used to using adjectives and we're used to describing things that are, kind of collided together. So the next one is verbal metaphor, where this is a noun and a verb. So this would be like the leaves danced or the wind whispered. So you have something doing something that it wouldn't realistically do. And some of it, we have heard metaphors over and over again throughout our life, either in songs or in poetry or just writing in general. So some of it can become a little bit cliche, so we don't even think of it as metaphor anymore. So like the wind whispered, a lot of people will hear the wind howled, right? That's something that's said over and over again, to where it doesn't click as a metaphor because we're so used to hearing it. Camden, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I noticed that you have both regular metaphors and you also have personifications. And I'm just wondering, do you think those would impact the listener differently?
I think it depends on what you're trying to say and sort of what you're trying to demonstrate to the listener. But sometimes a metaphor will be the same as personification, because it's kind of the same concept, because in personification, you're applying human characteristics to something that's not human, right? So that's kind of the same concept of writing in metaphor. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Perfect. So metaphor versus simile. So a lot of times I hear people say, well, I wrote metaphor, but then there's a like or an as in there. So what's the difference? They're similar, but there is a difference in how people perceive them. So simile is really an indirect comparison that uses like or as, and a metaphor is the direct form of comparison. So a simile would be like where you are saying something is like something else. The metaphor is saying it is something else. So a simile, as we mentioned, includes like or as. The difference is how we perceive the two words. So whether you use metaphor or simile will depend on what you're trying to shine a spotlight on. So in a simile, the spotlight is shined on the word that is before the like, and kind of the first word within what you're saying. So love is like a river. So that keeps your listener's attention on love, where you could say love is like a river, love is like the sunshine. You could kind of change those similes and it still focuses on the love aspect. Whereas if you say love is a river, that shines more of a spotlight on the river, where you kind of need to expand on what are those qualities of the river that love has. So the spotlight really makes a difference on if you use the simile or metaphor. So taking a look at before rather we get into kind of doing some exercises. I know we kind of went fast through those concepts. Are there any questions or thoughts from anyone on that? Neil.
Yes, hi Chad.
Hey,
First off, thanks so much for doing this. I've already learned a lot.
awesome.
Yeah, the thing that's I'm wondering about, where do you come down on the spectrum between like expressing a metaphor that's very clear and very explicit about like easily understood, like love is a river, for example, something like that, or something like a metaphor that's really kind of deeper and out there and obscure, and which way, maybe I realize that it's kind of a subjective thing which way you want to go, but for your own songwriting, or what does Pat Pattison advise? Does he uh, veer towards clarity or towards obscure?
Well, I think it comes down to what you want your listener to understand, right? Like I think you make the choice on how abstract or how concrete you go. Like you said, it is subjective. I would say that from this perspective on how to write like that, you could use some of the same processes that we're going to talk about, where you could, let's say you are thinking about love as a river, right? But you don't directly say it. So you could say things like, it flows, you know, I don't know, there's turbulence, like, you know what I mean? Like you could describe love with adjectives that describe the river, but it never says that love is a river. So that becomes a little more abstract and kind of leaving it open. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to, does it deliver the emotion that you're trying to get across? I think the most important thing is not so much does someone logically understand what your song is saying, but do they understand the emotion that you're trying to communicate? Because I think that's at the heart of everything. All the decisions that we make as a songwriter are really about, how does this help me communicate the idea or emotion? Does that make sense? We could probably go through tons of songs and talk about it for hours like that, but that's a good question, Neil. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that does make sense, and to veer it towards um, what kind of emotion are you trying to do, kind of focuses the question again, because you could do it either way, because it could be something more abstract, but somehow it grabs somebody because of the imagery, because of something like that, or it's more direct, and people obviously enjoy that when they hear something directly stated. It's always a good thing, especially if it's
Yeah.
stated with a slight twist, is what you get with a metaphor, I think.
So like, I think with the other thing too is, like, how many words do you have? If you're trying to fit, a certain rhythm in your melody, or you're trying to like match lines or something, that may determine how abstract you get, right? You may only get one sentence to show that love is a river, right? In the chat, Tom says love is a tangerine. Would that be abstract? Um, Love is a tangerine actually becomes concrete through the imagery of a tangerine. So, like for me, when you think love is a tangerine, I instantly think sweet, it's bright, it's citrusy, like all of those things. So then it moves from the abstract to the concrete. So you're looking at love through the lens of the tangerine. Pat says, if you're telling a story in a song, does it have to have metaphors? No, it doesn't have to have metaphors. It really depends on, do you have the content that you feel that it needs to kind of show your listener what's happening? You know, if we talked about falling in love and we just said, "Oh, it's so great, it's so wonderful," like those words, great, wonderful, those don't give us any imagery at all. But like when Tom's line where it says, "Love is a tangerine," it's sweet and it's succulent, and like now all of a sudden your listener experiences that sensation through their experience with the tangerine. So you don't have to use it, Pat, but it's a great tool to kind of take your listener in that way. Ron, you had your hand up as well.
I think just a quick question. Would you say that using a simile versus a metaphor would kind of contribute to whether your lines or phrase is stable versus unstable?
Um, no, I think it affects more of what you write after it, to be honest. Like if you say love is like a river, you may want to explain a little bit why that is, right? But if you say love is a river, it makes your listener want to really understand like what do you mean. So you kind of have to commit to that image a little bit more, if that makes sense. But it doesn't necessarily contribute to stable or unstable unless what you're comparing something to is stable or unstable, right? So
I see.
that might determine what your metaphor is. So if you said love is a tangerine, that means something different than love is a trailer fire, right? One's a little bit more stable than the other. So yeah, that's a great question though.
Thank you.
And actually, Ron, in coming up in these exercises, we'll go through some exercises that show you how to determine what type of metaphor you want to use based on qualifying characteristics of what you're trying to say.
Awesome.
Eves.
Yeah, you can hear me? Yeah.
Yep, we're
Okay.
good.
In the qualifying metaphor, is it like a premise? Like, do you need more than one phrases to have a conclusion? Like X is Y, dy is of X. So do you need more phrases? Or could you only use one phrase to combine everything?
Yeah, you can do both actually. And I'll show you in these exercises that we're going to do really what that process looks like and how you can, like, what I like to do are metaphor writing exercises to get my mind thinking in different ways. So what I will do is use those that sort of formula, the X is Y, you know, those, and then write either like a couple of sentences or like a paragraph kind of building and riffing on why that thing is that and sort of what qualities it has. But we're going to do some of that exercise coming up next.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And then Ebony says, a double two-edged sword is the beauty of you, Lord. Is that metaphor or just opinion? A double-edged sword is the beauty of you. It's kind of a metaphor. Yeah, I think that's definitely on the lines of a metaphor for sure, because you're comparing the beauty to a double-edged sword. So jumping into these exercises, we're just going to take a couple of minutes here. So exercise number 1 is we're going to use the word winter, and I think that's mainly because I'm in Minnesota and we're just coming out of winter. But so the word that you're going to take, or the noun, is winter, and let's take about 2 minutes and let's write down 3 qualities that winter has. So and I'll come back once the 2 minutes is up, but write down 3 qualities that winter has on your page there. And then I'll be back in a couple minutes.
Beauty.
In the chat, Steve said we're looking for qualities, not metaphors. Correct. So we're actually just looking at what are some qualities that winter has. All right, so I see a couple of people still writing, but we will just kind of start to wrap up. Anna asked, by qualities, do you mean adjectives? Yes, so attribute, so it would be adjectives, kind of like the just the how you would describe winter, or what are pieces of it. So it could be, you know, adjectives for sure, or it could be other qualifications as well. So jumping to some of the things that people are posting in the chat to me. So Steve Garvey says, winter is cold, winter is bleak, winter is long. Connie says, winter is cruel beauty, crisp brilliance, and gray slumber. Glenn has a question, says, can you mix metaphors and similes in a single song? For sure. Yeah, you just want to be careful to make sure that you're not confusing your listener by throwing too much at them. But again, you have to look at the lens of, is this communicating the emotion and the topic that I want to communicate? Han says, on an unrelated note, he loves the graphic design of this presentation. This is a free theme that I found online for Google Slides, so I can't take credit for the graphics. Jay says winter has a quality of being frigid, thoughtless, discomforting. Tom says it's isolating and silent. Lania says dark, piercing, and secluded. Dory says stark and ruthless. Neil, winter is harsh, it's stark, it's narrow. Susie said cold, still, bare. Dory says unrelenting. It's cold. Ebony says cold, harsh, white. Ruth says snowy, cold, quiet. It keeps moving on me. I just lost my spot. Oh, there we go. Tom says it's sleep or fleeting sleep. Chris says it's dark, cold, shimmery, bleak. Zoe says raw knuckles, visible breath, Christmas laughs. Winter, Han says winter is chilly, gray, and damp. Steve says quiet, indifferent, and violent. That's an interesting description. Michael says heavy clothing. Camden says cold, dark, and windy. So now that you have these three qualities that winter has, step 2 is for each of the qualities that you wrote down, what is another noun that also shares that quality? And try to think outside of the concept of winter. So if you say winter is cold, what else is cold? And if you say like winter is long, what else is long? So let's take just a couple minutes here, about 2 minutes, and for each one of those qualities that you wrote down, what would be another object or thing that would have those same qualities? And then we'll come back in a couple minutes. Neil says just one noun for each. Yeah, for now, just unless you have, multiple ideas, you can definitely write those down because we'll continue to develop on each step that we're doing here. Steve Garvey says the Arctic is cold. That seems a little bit more like a declaration because there's not as much conflict from cold and Arctic. So Tom asked if he can use someone else's. Yep, you can cheat off other people's paper here. Ebony says that her ex-husband is all three. And Steve said ex-wife is cold too. Yeah. Tom also says there's a lot of cliches, and that's true. So that's part of it too. Is sometimes we don't want to go with the obvious thing that pops into our head because it can be overused, right? So that becomes a cliche, where a cliche is something that's said so many times that it sort of loses its true meaning, and we don't really listen to it anymore. Camden says, are we looking for literal, like ice is cold, or can we use different forms of the word? It doesn't have to be literal. So colds can mean, if you're using the adjective colds, there's a Luke Combs song called Cold as You, and it's about, he wants to go somewhere and drink where the beer's as cold as this person that he's singing to. So as you're finishing up, I do see people posting in the chat. So Anna says hearts of those who don't share common values. Jay says frigid as a meat locker, thoughtless as a sociopath, discomforting as a malconstructed next. Ruth says cold, snow, face, air, outside, ground. Chris says winter is cold like afternoon coffee. Winter is a saltine cracker. Winter is a sheet of paper. Winter is a milkshake. There's some good things showing up here. So Neil has winter is harsh. Winter is stark. Winter is narrow. Hate is harsh. The land is stark. Amaze is narrow. So now that we have step 2, where you've picked things that have those qualities, this is where you then take those things and you pick your favorite thing out of what you had written down and you drop it into the formula where winter is blank, or the blank of winter, or the winter's blank. So pick what you liked the best and run it through all 3 of these layouts, because we're starting with winter, which is our X, and then you're selecting the Y. So, with I'm going to pick on you, Neil. Like you had a maze is narrow. So winter is a maze would be one, or the maze of winter, or the winter's maze. So take something that you had picked from those items and run it through this, and then we'll come back in a couple minutes as well. So one thing I see in the chat, Neil wrote, winter is hate, the hate of winter, the winter's hate. Of those three, some of those kind of look, or they work better than the other ones. So I think that's the usefulness of running your concept through these different options, is because then you can pick what sounds the best or what kind of delivers your idea. So Neil's second, was winter is land, and he has like question mark. The land, so it's like that doesn't necessarily make sense. You could maybe add a qualifying metaphor where it's like winter is vast land, or but you could also explain it more like winter is land that you have to trek across, and not everybody makes it, and something like that. But you have the land of winter, that sounds like it makes more sense. Or the winter's land, to me, opens itself up for further exploration. So that's really great. Susie wrote the nudity of winter. I like that, because you could flip that too with the winter's nudity, or winter is nudity, but that doesn't make as much sense. Han says winter is a deep voice, the deep voice of winter, and the winter's deep voice. That's really cool. Lauren says hammer. Connie says winter is a silvery nap, the silvery nap of winter, the winter's silvery nap. That's awesome too. Do you see how some of these instantly it gives you a little bit of that kind of like, there's like a little spark of something there that is like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like, that's what's fun about these, is when you do these yourself, it's like you start to write things that you wouldn't necessarily sit down and just conjure out of thin air. So it gives you a way to start running through this. Winter is this is Susan. She said, winter is an empty house, the empty house of winter, winter's empty house. That creates a lot of imagery. That's awesome. Ebony says winter's white harsh law, or the harsh law of winter. Yeah, I think the harsh law of winter works a little bit better in that situation. Tom says some qualities work better with one type than the other. Exactly. So that's where if you get stuck, it helps to really kind of use this as a guide for sure. Camden says winter is a businessman, the businessman of winter, or the winter's businessman. That's really cool. Chris says winter is an afternoon coffee, the afternoon coffee of winter, the winter's afternoon coffee. Chris says that last one sounds best. Chris, I agree, definitely. Adam, you made it. Adam says winter is a challenge. That's great. Susie, the winter's abyss. Glenn, winter's icy fingers. That's great. And Camden said he's torn between the businessman of winter and the winter's businessman. I think it does change the perspective, because the businessman of winter makes it sound like there's something or somebody that's representing winter. And then the winter's businessman sounds like it's the winter is having someone represent it, which is interesting. Adam says the winter means business. Yes, it does. And Zoe says the winter's sangria. Ooh, I like that. That's cool. Because that sangria is kind of a lighter word, and winter is more of kind of gloomy. That's really cool. So step 4 now is to take your things that you created and write a little couple of sentences or like a paragraph. So these are my examples of the 3 variations. So mine were winter is a marathon. You have to prepare for it, and it will test your stamina. You need the right shoes. I also put the marathon of winter doesn't have any winners. We all just wait for it to end. We try to cheer each other on, but it won't go any faster. And then the last one I have is winter's marathon keeps getting longer and longer. It keeps twisting, this should be twisting and turning, and I wasn't prepared for this. So take your 3 variations, and we'll take a little bit more time on these because you'll want to stop and think of how you can expand on what you have written, and then we'll come back to these and do some sharing as well. And by the way, you can put these in the chat if you want to share, or you could also raise your hand and you can read them out loud too, whatever works best for you. It would be fun to have some folks read what they had written out loud as well. So we're starting to get some folks posting in the chat. So feel free to keep going if you're not quite finished. And then again, if you want to read yours out loud, you can definitely do that as well. Just raise your hand and I can call on you. Going to the chat first. So Hazeline says, winter is a stone cold heart. It takes warmth to melt it away. Hans writes, winter is a deep voice. It cuts through the skin and muscles and reaches the depths of your bones. Ooh, that's really cool. Also says, the deep voice of winter mirrors the inner voice of man. It is the voice of reflection and introspection. And then the winter's deep voice sends shivers down your spine and it makes you run for cover. So there's great imagery there for sure. Carolyn says, winter is a crystalline sculpture, a frozen monument in time that melts with the dawning sun. Awesome. I love that word monument. Or if, oh, I read it as monument, but you actually wrote moment. Cool. Glenn says, winter is an icy chain of days that seem to go on forever, only broken by an eggnog Christmas. I love the icy chain of days. That's a great image. Connie says, winter is a silvery nap. You'll dream of glittering treasures and celebration in the snow. The silvery nap of winter lures us in and leaves us cold. The winter silvery nap slowly turns gray and gets old. Awesome. I love a good nap. So yeah, that definitely draws me in for sure. Lania says, the seclusion of winter is inevitable. It's a cycle that is uncertain, a kind of numbness that lingers into the warmth of a new day. Jay says, winter is a sociopath with no remorse for its cold refrain. The sociopathy of winter lands like a bludgeoning, no malice sparked, but the sore and bruised by it all the same. And the winter sociopathy is circumstance, something not sought yet suffered all the same. Camden's is, the winter is a businessman. It's cold and unforgiving. The businessman of winter does not care who suffers, and the winter's businessman does not care who suffers. Lauren is, winter is a hammer that shapes the world in its frozen image. Awesome. That's cool. Adam says, winter is a challenge you must endure in order to earn the reward of spring. Awesome. That sounds like a Hallmark card, kind of. That's what you'd send to your friends that are suffering in Minnesota. Let's jump to some folks that have their hands up. Neil, do you want to go first?
Sure. Okay, so I've got the first one. Winter is a maze. It's full of twists and turns and seems endless, but if you keep at it, it will end. Number two, the maze of winter keeps putting up blocks. At every turn, you feel lost. You can't find a way out. And three, the winter's maze is a puzzle. You struggle through it, but bit by bit, you find a way out. They're all kind of similar.
Yeah, no, that's great. Those are great. What I love about these exercises is the fact that we're all writing about the same topic, right? But we're all saying it in such a different way. And when we talk about finding your own songwriting voice and trying to be sort of your original self, that's what we're talking about is, you know, if you're writing a song about love, which love is very universal, right? Like we all experience it in some form or another. So how can you use metaphor then to explain something that's been explained a million times before? You know, that's how you start to get out of cliche, is the more imagery and original imagery that you can use in your writing, the more original your concepts and your songs will be. So great, Neil. Ebony, you had your hand raised as well.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we're good.
Great. So I wrote, this harsh law of winter leaves you defenseless like an orphan, left unprepared when I met you there to briefly receive my portion.
Wow. Yeah, so you added some rhyme in there too. So you started going into writing kind of a verse. That's great. Awesome. Thank you. Ron, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, my quality was snow, and one of the nouns I realized afterwards I put an adjective in there, so I've got bad signal. Reflecting back in the old days when we had TV antennas and you had to move the thing around. But the three I got was the winter is a bad signal, exemplifying the harshness of your love when I need the warmth sun of summer. And I've got a bad signal of winter promises a new connection of personalities, warm love turning a cold heart. And the winter's bad signal is a warning to turn your love around.
Cool. Do any of those kind of resonate with you more than the other, Ron?
I think the first one, the winter is a bad signal, exemplifying the harshness of your love when I need a warm sun of summer.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Back to the chat. So Susan has, winter is an empty house. There is nothing to warm you, nothing to feed you, nowhere to hide. Awesome. Stu says, winter is death. All life and color are sapped from the world. It's an annual reminder of where we're headed, the full stop needed for a new beginning. That's awesome. Tom says, winter is a narrow path, means winter is restrictive. There's little inclination to meander away from your intended route in winter. When outside, you go directly to your destination to avoid the dangers or minefields just off your path. Spring, summer, and fall share so many attributes. Winter does not. Much of the pleasures of the other seasons are not found in winter. Wow, that's pretty profound. I've never thought about that before, but winter is kind of its own beast. There's a metaphor there too. Winter is a beast. Susie said, winter is a nude woman. She lays bare her heart and is fully exposed. She feels the chill and vulnerability, the nudity. Cool. That's really cool. So some of these, when you're writing them, you know, as we're reading them, they may not necessarily sound like lyrics, but if you started to set some of these things to music, you may come up with some really cool songs out of some of these things that you know you're writing today. Camden says, the businessman of winter does not care who freezes. Tawai says, winter is visible breath. Its heat has left the warm that was inside. It's the kiss of two opposites that meet somewhere in the middle. Susie also says, the nudity of winter shows the truth. Laid bare, it offers its secrets with no place to hide. And then Susan has another one. Winter's empty house is cold, physically, socially, and spiritually. You find no welcome, harbor, or provision. And then Steve says, winter is a disease. You may not feel it right away, but as it progresses, it tears the life from you. The disease of winter takes its toll on the strongest of individuals. Bundle up as much as you can, but oftentimes it's unbeatable. Winter's disease spreads through my body with a vengeance, killing my cells with its hate. Wow, that's an interesting way to think about winter for sure. So we have a ton of things here in the chat. Let's go ahead and move on just in the interest of time though, but thanks for everybody for sharing in there. So the next exercise that we're going to do is start having you just pick random nouns. So instead of thinking about qualities, what if you just start taking random words and putting them together? And what does that inspire for you? So this exercise is to take one word from each column and slam them together with words from the other column, or you could combine from anywhere. So if you see words, you can combine them together. So use the same process and use the X is Y, the Y of X, and the X is Y, and then pick your favorite that you come up with and write a couple of sentences or a paragraph like we just did. So we'll take a few minutes and do this exercise. Does this make sense? Does anybody have questions on this process? Jay, have you had your hand raised?
Yes, Chad. If you could just give a quick example, I'd really appreciate it.
So an example would be like if I just picked depression is a skateboard, right? Like depression is a skateboard, or I could do the skateboard of depression is one that drags me deep into the darkness, right? So you take one word and you use the formula. So it would be depression is a skateboard, or the skateboard of depression, or depression's skateboard. And then pick whatever you like best, and then write a few sentences or a paragraph about that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, brother.
You're welcome. So we'll give it a few minutes. So go ahead and see what collisions you can come up with, and then we'll come back and we'll have some folks read out loud what they did. So we'll let some of you start finishing up. I'll start reading some of the ones that are popping up in the chat here. So Neil says, the cave of courage is the deepest unknown. It's a scary place full of secrets and surprises. When you reemerge, you see the light. Awesome. Glenn says, the cave of contentment swallows me up in its strong walls and deep recesses of intrigue. Very cool. That, yeah, cave of contentment. That sounds like a band name, actually. Susan says, love is the moon and stars. It dances through the dark ocean as a guiding light across the sky, tickling a trail through the heavens hush. Very cool. Camden says, depression is a cave. You get lost within the echoes. That's awesome, Camden. Lania, to worry is a cave. The screams inside of me echo with fear. You see a strong exterior, but what's inside of what you but what's inside of what you may think of me doesn't live there. Ebony says the cave of contentment has snatched away time and sold it to another. That's really cool. Han says worry is a cave that twists and turns, life-sucking creatures hanging from the top, skeletons buried in the deep, damp recess, rhythmic pouring of cyclic thoughts, feels like there's no way out. Adam says love is a hot air balloon that needs fuel to stay hot and attention in order to navigate the inevitable harsh weather. That's really good, too. Nice work, Adam. Dory says, contentment is a sailboat that keeps me afloat in the sea of chaos, directing my path as I cross a channel of unknown waters. Ebony says, love is a precious oven of passion, but we can't stay forever. I love that. Stu says, worry's cave. It's dark, unfathomable, claustrophobic. You go around in circles, you get lost, and you can't escape. Steve Olson says, the oven of worry slowly increases in heat. The more thought it's given, the higher and more intense the heat. If left to continue, it swells to an unbearable level. Well, that's a really cool image, because that's really how all of us have kind of experienced worry, I think, and it just starts to build and build and build. So that's really cool. And a lot of these, what you guys are writing, I could hear them set to music and really being the start of some really cool songs too. Chris says, the cave of love is dark and safe. Wolves howl outside, but inside we're lost and found. That's awesome. I love the wolves howl outside. That creates a great image. Connie, contentment is a sailboat, skimming over the waves, blissfully unaware the watery depths of treachery beneath. All is sunny and carefree, this small craft between. That's really awesome. Lauren says, contentment is like a sailboat running in the wind. Really good imagery there too. Camden says, cave was pretty popular. Yeah, a lot of people picked cave. Jay says, courage is an oven. Transform your fear into strength. Oven is courage. Forge your spirit, soul, experience into a dish you'll love for years. Heating from the box, it comes. Marry your mind's ingredients. Pan-filled love is made from one. Baking scary thing to new. Courage. That's cool, Jay. Susie, the hot air balloon's courage to soar to dizzy heights and aim for the clouds. It hurriedly sails across the skyline in a dream and shows a calm presence like an eagle flying. Nice work there as well. Ron says, your love is a sailboat, floating me to the distant horizons, taking me where the clouds meet the earth. Take me farther than any sea can travel. Awesome. And Tom, we'll do this as the last one here. So Tom says, worry's cave entices you to enter a quiet place without frustration or concern, but the cave is a trap. Once inside, there is little desire to leave, and you live a lotus-like existence. So Tom, you had some metaphors going on there as well. So cave is a trap. There's worry's cave. You also have lotus-like existence, which is a simile. So you have kind of combining different images into one, which I think is really, really cool. So nice work there.
It wasn't intentional, honestly. Just
yeah. So that's an example of, and Tom, I don't know if you were the one that asked about, multiple or like combined metaphors, but that would be an example where you kind of have many things that are going on within the same section. So let's move ahead to our next exercise, which again, this is where we're starting to move into verbs and nouns. So we've basically been focused on the nouns are nouns, right? So something is something else. Now we're going to start doing the same process in, you don't necessarily use the same formula, although you can, but you'd have to turn your verbs into a noun. But this is where you just take the concept and let's say a flower kisses, right? The flower kisses. So write a paragraph or a couple of sentences by combining a noun with a verb. So that was just one example of flower kisses. But take a few minutes and pick a noun and use a verb to write just a sentence, or if you have a couple of sentences or a little paragraph as well. And we'll come back and do this. So any questions on this one? We are making a little bit of a shift from the nouns to the verbs in this one. Perfect. Well, take a couple minutes and we'll come back and start reading, and would love to hear some of you sharing yours as well.
Can we use more than one word from each column?
Yeah, sure. Whatever inspires you, for sure. And it looks like we have some folks that are posting, so we can go ahead and I'll start reading those as some of you also start finishing up here. So a lot of folks are writing some really powerful sentences that I think, you know, would be awesome lyrics. So Tom wrote, "Joy paints a watercolor future." So joy paints a watercolor future. That's really cool. Adam says, "Pain writes the darkest chapters in the books of our lives." That's deep. That's really cool, Adam. Very cool. Steve Olson says, "The hurt smiles at me, knowing it has won." That's really cool too, Steve. That sounds like a great first line of a song, because it makes you wonder what led up to that, right? So that would be a great kind of starting point of a song. Camden says, "Flowers gasp after holding their breath all winter." That's a really cool image. I love that. Chris says, "Joy begs for the spotlight, but she's in my blind spot." That's awesome. Ebony says, "Joy writes a song to my scattered heart and encourages it to reassemble." Ooh, I love that. Encourages it to reassemble. Like that scattered and reassemble, like that's a great use of opposites. Nice work there. Han says, Joy smiles like an innocent child, content with what is, filled with awe and wonder. I love all of those words together really paint a great picture for sure. Jay says, table smiles as or the table smiles as welcome to those dining during the holidays, playing board games at reunions and praying for the mourned. That's really cool. Stu says the flower gasps as it blooms, shocked by its own beauty. That's a cool concept, Stu. I like that. Steve says hurt writes a tragedy on the heart. The scar it leaves makes it harder to be heart again, but it also makes it more difficult for love to enter. I love that the scar images there for sure. Lania says, when pain is the source of calm, it feels like the kisses I always remembered. Ooh, when pain is the source of calm, it feels like the kisses I always remembered. That's really cool. So pain is like kisses. That's interesting because that's kind of a juxtaposition of something that normally we associate with feeling good and then having pain. I like that play on opposites too. Tawai says, Joy begs me to come and play, but pain told me she doesn't stay long. Hurt pushed me into her, and I'm glad we met. That's really cool. Glenn says, Joy paints your face with idyllic smiles of inner contentment and sends kisses to my eyes. Neil says, the pain smiles in your eyes. Glenn, that was really cool. I like the painting and sending kisses. And Neil, pain smiling. I love that kind of opposite play on that one too. Connie says, Joy writes my story, the place I'm meant to be. Happy as a rolling coaster, sliding whimsically. Joy is a deep well, giving and refreshing, always waiting patiently. Awesome. And Lauren says, Joy paints the world in a burst of colors. That's great as well. So that was kind of combining nouns and verbs. So moving on to the next exercise, we're going to start thinking about, as you're writing songs, one of the ways that we get stuck when we're writing and trying to come up with images is we have an emotion that we're trying to communicate, right? But we can't always come up with images, or how would we communicate an emotion through images? So this is where going through these metaphor exercises comes into play. So let's pretend that you're writing a song about regret and you want to create some images for your listener. So what I'd like you to do is use what we already learned, the X is Y, the Y of X, and the X is Y. And I would like you to take regret and run it through a noun. So we're taking this emotion and running it through a noun that's in this list, or if you are inspired to write through another noun, definitely do that. But let's take a few minutes and run regret through what we've already learned. Any questions on this exercise? Perfect. Go for it. We'll come back in a few. All right, so we're starting to get people posting in the chat. Also, remember you can raise your hand as well if you'd like to read yours out loud. Don't have to be shy. Glenn says, regret is a turtle slowly crawling into my consciousness and forming its shell around me. That's a really great image. The verbs, I think, like crawling and forming, like those create a ton of imagery as well. Camden says, regret's sweater hides from the coldness of your consequences. That's really deep. Great work, Camden. Ebony, did you want to share?
Yes, because I was kind of, I don't know, this one was a little tricky for me, but I did write the regret of sitting at the table. The regret of sitting at the insecure table of love. And then the other one I said, because I was confused, I'm sorry, but I wrote I regret the shark's false welcome. I'm sorry, the friendship of the shark's false welcome. And I think I was kind of confused with this one.
That's okay. No. So instead of saying, what you did was you had regret in relationship to another metaphor, because I think your first one was regret was you said the table of, can you read your first one again?
Regret of sitting at the insecure table of love.
Yeah, so the insecure table of love. So the insecure table is a metaphor where you were kind of referring to it, like regret was sort of involved in that picture. So even though regret wasn't creating the metaphor, it was, you still created a metaphor. So it's still the same concept for sure.
Okay. All right. I'll start that one. Thank you.
Yeah. Stu says, every night we eat the same frugal meal at the table of regret. Ooh, that's awesome. Tom says, regret is a turtle. The view from my heart never changes. Cool. Neil, the shark of regret bites hard and bleeds your soul. It doesn't care, and you're left to pick up the broken pieces. That's great. Dory says, this web of regret has me caught in a place I can't forget, stuck, paralyzed, every scene memorized, no safety in my web of regret. So web of regret is kind of the metaphor, right? So regret doesn't actually have a web. So that's where you're combining concepts of one thing and putting it to another. So Dory kind of riffed off of the idea of regret and another noun. So that's great. That's great work, Dory. Chris says, regret sweater holds the naked truth of my existence. Awesome. Adam says, regret sweater makes me itch uncontrollably. Yes, that's that's really cool. I like that. Steve says, the sweater of regret is unraveling, leaving me with nothing but a naked feeling. Ooh, I like that a lot. That's really cool. Connie says, the orange juice of regret, sharp and sweet, slides down, regurgitates in acidic remorse. Ooh, those are some cool images too, Connie. I like that. I actually, when I was looking at these, I thought orange juice of regret, like it does give that image of like, how do you like drink in regret and like, what does it do to you? Steve Garvey says, flowers' regret is that its beauty brings about its demise. Whether plucked or bred, it soon turns brown, its petals softly falling to the ground till it is discarded to make way for younger, fresher beauties. So flowers' regret. That's great. I like that a lot. And that's such a metaphor for just a lot of things in life, right? The make way for younger and fresher beauties. Unfortunately, that's kind of our society, right? Chris says, the sweater of regret unravels at the feet of hope. That's really cool. Han says, regret is a shark. It creeps up on you when you least expect, biting off a chunk of your joy. Ooh, I love the chunk of joy too, because that's kind of that's a really cool image. You know, that's kind of That's kind of a metaphor as well. That's really cool. Jay says, regret is a turtle scooting along a memory cobblestone-laden road. Turtle is a regret basking in dirty pools of pain consequenced by our choice. Regret's turtle is always in motion, always bearing a load. Regret's turtle never lands at the finish. Remorse is always its ploy. Really cool, Jay. Jay has such a poetic way of writing all the time. Ron says, the shark of regret eats the love from within, consuming until there's nothing left but a sea of cold, wet darkness. Yeah, the shark of regret. That's such a really cool image too, because, you know, when you think of sharks, you think of danger, you think of, you know, a hunter, right? And regret put into that context really, really stands out. Susie says, regret is a flower which never saw the sun and ended its life in darkness with no color and beauty. That's really sad, but that's really deep as well. Tom says, regret seems to hit a nerve with everybody. Well, regret was the emotion that we were all starting. But regret is an interesting emotion that you kind of have to think about a little bit, right? Because it can mean different things. So Lania says, regret is a mouthful of words I won't take back, laid on a table serving all I held back from the starvation you put me through. Great imagery there as well. Susie, the flower of regret which never reaches full bloom in its potential. That's really cool as well. Susan says, regret's sweater is too tight, too warm, and it's uncomforting. It's the ugly wrap around my joyless heart. There's a lot of great stuff in there too. The regret sweater is too tight, like that instantly created, just that line alone created image for me. And then Susie says the regrets flower loses its petal, never to return. Adam also says regrets flower has the most thorns of any species of plant. That's cool. Adam says the orange juice of regret needs to be strained of its pulp. That's really cool. And the Eve says a fallen petals flower is like adding burning piece of wood in my soul. Nice work, everyone. That's great. So we have a couple more exercises. So the next one is we want you to write, or I want you to write a verse. So start putting on your songwriting hat and try to come up with a metaphor with the word, and the word is boyfriend, and write a verse. And what I mean by verse is like 4 or 6 lines. You can rhyme or you don't have to rhyme, but think of kind of like a song, right? So think if you're sitting down and someone says, I want you to write me a song about boyfriend. You can come up with whatever that means, but use that to spark some form of metaphor. So this one might take a few more minutes. So we'll probably give you about 4 or 5 minutes to work on this. But any questions on what we're doing for this exercise? Perfect. Well, good luck. Oh, Ebony, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so just like we did with regret, but we're going to use the word boyfriend.
So this time, kind of, yeah. So this time we're actually going to start thinking in song form. So we're going to start thinking like, how would we write a verse to a song? So usually a verse is about 4 to 6 lines. So you could use boyfriend, create a metaphor, and then put that into a verse.
But we don't have to say boyfriend.
You don't have to, but that would be, you know, probably be able to explain kind of how you got to whatever you do, right? But if you can use boyfriend, that would be great.
I can. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, we'll start wrapping up a little bit. I do see that people are posting in the chats. Again, if you'd like to read yours out loud as well, be sure to use the hand reaction and I can call on you as well. I'll just give it a couple more seconds here, and then I'll start reading what people have written. All right. So, Jay, did you want to share?
Sorry, sure, I'll give it a whirl. Bear in mind, I'm no vocalist, so if you have to fire me, you just have to fire me.
Okay.
Boyfriend is stack of brick, no etiquette, unformed, waiting for a lover come with blueprints to build him to a store. Boyfriend now has tables, chairs, and carpet, mild with stains. Boyfriend serves her lemonade when she's arrived, parched from her long day.
Cool. I like your I like the melody that you have too. And just so people know, you don't have to necessarily sing your verse. So if you just want to read it, you can do that as well. But Jay, that was cool. Da 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 da. I like that melody for sure.
Appreciate it.
James in the chat says the boyfriend is a player. Got a new one every week. He's got a menacing glare before he sinks his teeth. That's really cool. Boyfriend is a player is kind of a metaphor, but a boyfriend could, in the sense that we're thinking, that's really more of a declaration, but that's still a cool, definitely a cool verse. You could maybe change player into something else that creates more of a metaphor. So like, maybe like the boyfriend is a predator, which that may be too extreme, but this is just an example. But the boyfriend is a predator, got a new one every week. He's got a menacing glare before he sinks his teeth, something like that, which creates a different view than just saying he's a player. But that's awesome. Lauren says, "You said I was your boyfriend too." That's a cool lyric. Han says, "Boyfriend is a kaleidoscope of passion, fury, and fire, holding all my fears and hope, torn in love, hate, and desire." Super cool. I like that. Steve Garvey says, "Her boyfriend is a winner. He takes her out to dinner. He showers her with flowers. His name is Austin Powers." Cool. Susan says, "A boyfriend is a shooting star that sparks brightly, fades quickly, and leaves a long memory trail behind." I like that a lot. That's really cool. Connie says, "Longing for connection, dreaming of someone special, like a twin, but different, sharing laughs and thoughts alike as magnets, you and I, boyfriend." That's cool. That's cool that magnets is you and I, because that's a great metaphor. Tom, you had your hand raised.
Yeah. Can you hear me? I'm muted.
Yep.
No. I wrote, I came to you wounded, a bullet in my heart, blinded with pain, my life growing duller and duller. Who'd have thought a boyfriend would make my life restart, but your joy paints my future in bright watercolors. I like that line.
That's really cool. Joy paints. That's really great. Thanks, Tom.
I stole from the early exercise.
Yeah. Well, hey, whatever works. That's great. Lauren, you had your hand raised as well.
Yeah. I don't know. Can you see me? I can't see myself.
Yep.
Sorry, I wrote something, but I didn't write it all. So you said I was your boyfriend. I didn't know it then, but like the stars in heaven, above a cloudless desert, I was one of many, too numerous to mention.
Very cool. Awesome. Nice work. Camden says, "The boyfriend is a sun, brings one person joy, brings another burns." Ooh, that's cool. "You will go blind if you stare at the boy. Jealousy's glow infects your vision." That's really original, Camden. That's really cool. I like that. Susie says, "The marshmallow of a boyfriend's love, soft and sweet with the passion fire. It tastes intensified with gooey delight." Those are really great image words too, Susie. Tawai says, your boyfriend is a locked house, has picket fences, mass expenses. You need a passcode for that too. I like that. I like the picket fences, mass expenses. I love that rhyme. That's really cool. Ebony says, he is masculine like a titan. My gladiators loves the violence. Harsh like winter snowfall. Silent, a narcissist, a tiny tyrant. He has my heart and mind warped on autopilot. That's really cool. I like the rhythms of some of those lines as well. That's awesome. Lania says, when you're my boyfriend, my days fit me right. My mind is open, a love I can't fight. Now I'm hoping our love lights us like a spotlight. Cool. Nice work there as well. Adam says, spaghetti is marinara's boyfriend. So much better when firm. Though without his sauce, he can't transcend a meal into something long-term. That's cool. I like that fun, the fun rhythm there too, Adam. Chris says, your boyfriend is Madison Square Garden on a Monday night. Empty and echoing, doesn't care at all about your life. That's a really cool image. A big empty stadium. That's cool. Chris Graybill says, he gave me that boyfriend look like we have a special secret. Was there more to that, Chris? It looks like there was a comma, but I don't see anything else there. And then Steve Olson says, a boyfriend is a heavyweight who keeps you stuck in one place. You're anchored with no visible future. Your life is now a waste. Awesome. So nice work, everybody. Is there anybody else that would like to share what they had written there? Perfect. So let's move on to the next exercise then. So this time, instead of writing a verse, we are going to write a chorus. And this time I would like you to come up with a metaphor for country church. So try to use the X is Y, the Y of X, and the X is Y for this exercise and write a chorus. And before we do that, Stu posted, he said, it's not looking good. Your belief is not so fresh. All hope is not lost, but I wouldn't hold your breath. Disappointment is the boyfriend of hope. Ooh, I like that last line. That's cool. So with this one, with the chorus, a chorus again is usually 4 or 6 lines or so in commercial music as well. So try to make a metaphor about a country church and write that into a song chorus. And then we'll come back in about 4 or 5 minutes and we'll see what you guys have this time around. All right, so we're starting to get folks that are posting in the chat. So we'll just give it a couple seconds here, let everybody start finishing up what they have. Go ahead, raise your hand if you'd like to read your chorus out loud. I'll also read from the chat as well. So Jay has, a country church is a county road. It has tales of its mile markers to share. A country church is a path I cruise to disembark the city sins of my youth. That's really cool. So you have the church as a county road. It's also a path. Those are great metaphors. Ebony wrote, Bubba preaching on Sunday. It's the best day of the week, but we all know what comes Monday. He won't practice what he preach. That's good. That doesn't really have a metaphor in there, but I do like the that section for sure. Tom says, it's a safe harbor for my life. Whoops, it just moved. It's a safe harbor for my life, a steadfast rock for all of time. The place where you became my wife, our little church nestled in the pines. Awesome. That's really cool. I like that you have the metaphor and sort of there's multiple metaphors in there. So it's a safe harbor, it's a steadfast rock, you know, all of those things come back to the church in the end. So that's a really cool payoff. Nice work. Stu says, it's old and broken down. The graves of dreams surround. All that's left is hurt. Our love is that country church. Awesome. So I like that. Love is the country church. Really cool. James has, country church is a haven for all those in need. The haven of the country church is a friend to you and me, and the country church's haven shelters all those in need. Nice work. That's great. Camden says, country church of a rose. Some see flowers, others see thorns. The surface is so pleasant if you approach it with caution. So the country church is a rose. Some see the flowers, others see the thorns. That's really cool. That's a really great image. Han says, country church is a lighthouse. When I find it, I find me. It brings me home when I'm lost. It shows me all that I could be. That's great. I love that. Country church is a lighthouse. That creates a cool image because it creates kind of like the lighthouse is like a beacon, you know, that draws you in. That's cool. Dory says, the country church is solid peace with strong connections underneath, the place on earth where I place my feet, where my roots run deep. I love that. I love the roots run deep line. That's super cool. Steve Garvey says, our love is a country church, not fancy, but filled with love, peaceful as a morning dove, joyous and full of laughter. We raise our voices to the rafters. Our love is a country church. Super cool. I like how you bookended that section with the Our Love is a Country Church. That sounds like the title of that song would be Country Church. That's really cool. Ebony says, small, small country church, open up to me. Small, small country church, new freedom, speak to me. That's a cool chorus as well. Connie R says, little country church is a tree planted by the river, its roots run deep. My little country church, never gonna leave. Seasons of my soul keep me coming back for more. I love that. I love the idea of a church being a tree, especially with the roots that you have there. That's really cool. Susan says, friends and family, family and friends, fellowship, laughter, pain and joy. It's my life never alone. My country church is home. Love that. Love that. That's really cool. Tuai says, out in the pouring rain, step underneath the roof that hides you from the pain. Country churches, or the country church is a piano. The keys you play, not one alone can be in harmony, but together we can be. Ooh, country church as a piano is awesome. You could build on that concept of, you know, the voices inside and like all of that stuff. Like you could really describe a church through a piano. That would be a great exercise to keep building on. Adam says, my country church is a blast of fresh air that you can't get in the city or the burbs. So get away from the rat race if you dare and breathe in my country church. Ooh, I like the church and burbs rhyme. That's super cool. And the country church, or Susie says, the country's church, open arms, come sing your prayers and seek hope. Anyone is welcome through its holy doors, like a shining hug in the darkness. Great work there. Lania says, country church, must I wonder, must I search, one another gather like pieces to a puzzle. Great work, you guys. Those are awesome. So next, we're going to do number 7, and this will be, I believe, the last exercise that we'll do, and then we'll start kind of wrapping up. But this kind of puts it into kind of just to recap sort of what we did. So this exercise is take something that's in the room that you're in right now and write the qualities of that object, and then pick one of those qualities and write down something else that has the quality, and then use those 2 objects then to finish out a metaphor. And you could just do it simply as one sentence, or you could write a paragraph if you're inspired as well. But we'll take just 2 minutes to do this and see how you do on this one, and then we'll come back and kind of wrap things up. All right, so we'll give it about 30 more seconds here. Seeing some good stuff in the chat. All right, so Ebony in the chat wrote, your heart is a brick wall. Wolves never breach, and the loved never leave. That's awesome. I like that. And is that a brick wall behind you, Ebony? It looks like might be. Perfect. Awesome. I think others might still be working on theirs, but does anybody else want to share? Neil says, I find my solace in the Kleenex box of TV. Ooh, the Kleenex box of TV. Interesting. My quilt is a nostalgic memory, comforting redemption. That's Connie. That's great. Adam says, these linens are is it Rorschach test of symmetry? I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but those are those where they show you abstract things and then you say what they mean, right? So Adam, do you have linens that are scattered all over? Cool. Stu says, you're my radiator. You warm up my life, but gosh darn, you're expensive to run. That sounds like a country song, Stu. You might want to go to Nashville with that one. Susan said, my hope is paper. It's flat, empty, waiting for the potential that may come, but too thin to hold my expectations. Ooh, that's really cool and deep. Nice. Steve Garvey says, ideas reverberate like a beat of a drum. Super cool. Hans, your kiss is a bottle filled with water that's just the right amount of cool. When I'm down and dusted fighting the world, it replenishes me to fight another day. Awesome. That's a really great metaphor. That's a great metaphor. Awesome. Susan said that's not true, though. Okay, that was still good. So moving along, for just to kind of start wrapping up what we've done today. So the tips on this are really, you can take these exercises and do some of these on your own on a daily basis. It only takes a few minutes, and there are online noun and verb generators that, you can just Google, random noun generator or random verb generator, and they will kick out random words for you. So you can start to keep training your mind to think like this, because the idea isn't so much to pull material out of what we've written today, although you could. I think there's a lot of great material in it, but the idea is to train your mind to think in metaphor, so you start to do it naturally instead of doing it on purpose. And that's something that I always say is, do these things on purpose until you do it by accident. And also, one thing that we didn't do today, but I would encourage you to do, is listen to songs that you love and try to spot all the places that they use metaphor or simile. I think you'll find that there's songs that you've listened to a million times, and until you consciously sort of listen to it, you may not realize how much they're using, metaphor in there as well. Also, you can do these exercises when you're doing co-writes too. Like if you get stuck and let's say you're writing on a certain topic, you can take a few minutes and kind of riff on some ideas and try some metaphors as well. So that really wraps up the presentation that I had for today. So does this seem helpful to you all? Is this something that you think you'll be able to incorporate, or what are your thoughts on kind of what we went over today? And go ahead and raise your hand, or I see some thumbs up showing up as well, but thank you all for coming. Adam, you had your hand up.
Chad, I want to thank you for doing this. This is invaluable. This is, I wish that we did this in elementary school. I mean, I don't know. This is, I think, just forcing us to go down pathways in our brain that we just don't. And I just feel so much sharper all of a sudden.
Cool.
So thank you so much, and everybody, for sharing a lot of wonderful stuff.
Yeah, thanks for coming as well. I definitely appreciate that. Jay, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, Chad. Really seconding what Adam said. I'm actually at home right now. Had surgery the other day, and so I'll be off my feet for a while. But these activities, these exercises, really give me a lot to keep just driving forward on, firing my little synapses on while I recover. So I really appreciate the sharpening exercises and keeping me lean and limber. And I can't thank you enough, man. Such great workshops.
Oh, well, thank you. Hopefully you heal up quick too. Sorry to hear that, you had something like that, but good thing you can still do these without, too much physical exercise. That's great.
Thanks, brother.
Tom.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm not usually a fan of writing exercises. I don't like them, but this was awesome. This was really, really good. A little stressful trying to keep up with, with inventing all this stuff, but it really paid off. I really enjoyed this. So thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for coming, and I'm glad that it's helpful for you. Looks like some people in the chat are saying they echo the stress. I think that's it's not meant to make you feel stressed out, but I do think sometimes when you push yourself, like if you have a time limit or you're sort of you sort of have to be creative on the spot, it does feel a little bit like stress, but eventually the more that you do it, the more you'll just be able to kick out, ideas very quickly. So thanks so much, Tom. Ebony.
Hi, yes, I just wanted to say thank you as well. This was my first workshop, singer songwriter workshop. I've been writing for a while, but I'm still fairly new. And these exercises were extremely helpful to me to help me go deeper into writing and kind of tap into, what I'm trying to express with some of the things that I'm saying without just being, too straightforward, just a little deeper, which is exactly what I needed. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that it helps, and hopefully you can, make it back to, another workshop for sure. Neil.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks so much, Chad, for doing this. This is really, really valuable stuff. I feel like I've seen a little bit of it before on your YouTube channel.
Yes.
At least in the smaller pieces, but good to review some of that, and a lot of new things to think about. I admit, other people alluding to the stress factor. I did get a little bit stuck on the boyfriend in the country church bit. Like my brain started to melt at that point. I was just like, you know what, I'm coming up with stuff that's terrible. I'm not even gonna share it. And I know it's terrible. So it's not even worth it. But
Yeah.
but I think moving forward, these are interesting exercises to do and things to think about. I have a fear that my struggle will be, okay, I've got this cool little nugget of a metaphor. What about the rest of the song? Where does
Sure.
to parlay that out and extend it into the rest of the song, is a whole other challenge, I think. But certainly really, really good starting points, because a lot of the time I do find that I ruminate on a song for a long time because I don't want to express it plainly. And then finally, weeks and weeks later, I stumble upon, oh, that's the metaphor I need. And then, but these exercises, I think, can maybe get to that point a little bit quicker, and maybe a little bit more, with a little more meat on the bone, which will enable me to extend it to the rest of the song in a more successful way, I think. So fingers
Awesome.
crossed.
Awesome.
Well,
Well,
thanks so much.
other workshops will, kind of explain how you can incorporate it into the rest of the song, but at least getting that nugget, are kind of these exercises for sure. Thanks, Neil. Hans.
Hey, hi, Chad. Hello from India. I guess Namaste.
Oh, awesome.
Um,
Welcome.
Thank you. This was my first workshop and I really enjoyed this. And this finally helped put into place the doubt that I've always had, that a lot of my mentors mentioned that you have to show more than telling. And I could never for the life of me figure out how to actually do that without sounding corny or elementary schoolish. So this was really helpful and I really appreciate your work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming, and you're welcome. I'm glad that it will help. And Lauren. Oh, you're on mute.
I missed the beginning, and I don't want to start a whole new topic because I know we're at the end, but I wanted to ask you, Chad, when I think of writing a song, I think of imagery. I love using imagery, and I think imagery is so effective because it opens the mind of the listener. But the question is, metaphor and imagery, do you see them connected, or are they different? And again, I don't want to start a big long train of thought, but I'm interested in your comments.
Yeah, so they're definitely related. And so the first thing is let's say you are writing a song and you don't have a lot of space to really go into a lot of imagery. Metaphor is a way that you can paint a picture for the listener about one thing by using another. Like if you say, my heart is fire, right? Like that is one sentence, one line. It shows something very quickly, where you could spend more time explaining what that means. But in people's minds, and even a metaphor is my heart is on fire, right? Like that is a little bit cliche, so it doesn't mean a lot, but at the same time, it gives an image. The other thing that you can do is, if you have these nouns, like if you say love is a fire, you can then do sense-based writing around fire and write from sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, movement, all of those senses. and create kind of a word palette that you can use to develop that metaphor more. So the imagery starts with the metaphor. So it's all kind of related, and I think it's all important. And one of the keys to really great songwriting is finding that balance of imagery and emotional writing, right? The images give context to the emotion. You know, if you just write a song where you say, I'm angry, I'm angry, I'm angry, your listener doesn't experience that, right? But if you say that, you know, when she said XYZ, I had fire in my eyes, your listener sees that as anger. So you're showing them instead of telling them, you know. So it's about finding that balance, and everybody's going to do it a little bit differently, but it really comes down to what are you communicating to the listener. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Thank you.
Cool. Well, everybody, that's going to wrap up for today. I appreciate everybody, you know, spending a couple hours here this morning. The next workshop, like I said, is looking at Taylor Swift songwriting, which is April 23rd. So a couple weeks from now. So hopefully we'll see some of you coming back, and definitely follow, you know, what we're doing on the meetup.com page, and then at homesongwriting.com, which is the YouTube channel. So thanks everybody for coming, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.